between. I mean,
Yeah, it's going now.
No.
When
is.
and where were you born?
I was born in New Jersey in a town called Montclair in April 26th in 1942
Okay.
In a hospital or in your...
in a hospital.
Keep going. Oh, I have to stop.
Do you know why you were given your name you have?
Well, I know that Grandma was going to have a different name, and it was going to be Brenda, because Grandma would listen to a radio program and there was a Brenda on it. But Grandpa did not like the name, so they gave me the name Elaine.
Tell me about your mother. What was her full name, and when and where was she born? Where did she grow up? Any interesting stories about her?
My mother's name, she had two Norwegian names, and she did not like the first name, which was Ragna. She had a middle name named Signa, so she always made sure that people would call her by her middle name, Signa, and you have a sister named Signa after my mother.
Where was she born?
She was born in Brooklyn, New York. They lived there then in 1915, and she lived for 96 years. So she had a long, healthy life. She was very independent and lived on her own till the very last year. And growing up, surprisingly, Grandma was a very tiny lady, but she was really a pudgy little girl. And we had a family picture. In fact, Grandma still has it at home, where you see her and she looks like her cheeks are full, real blown up because she was so fat. But she lost all that. And Grandma was a kind, quiet lady, never would get mad. I never remember my mom and daddy fighting at all. She was a nice, wonderful lady, and I miss her real much, a whole lot.
Ready.
Go.
Tell me about your father. What is his full name, and when and where was he born? Where did he grow up? Any interesting stories about him? What did he do for a living?
My dad was born in Norway, in the southern part of Norway, in a town called Mandal. He was one of 7 children. He had four sisters, and there were 3 brothers. And at the age of 17, he got on a ship and came to America. He was the oldest of these 7 children, but he did not want to stay there and be responsible for the family farm. That's what the family did. Grandpa's full name was Christian Skagestad. Now, Skagestad was the name of the farm, and all his other brothers and sisters, before they married, had that name. But when Grandpa came to America, he did not like that name. People had a hard time pronouncing it, so he wanted to legally change his name, and he changed it to Knutson, which means the son of Canute, which was the name of his dad. Grandpa was a carpenter. He came to America and could not speak any English, and he went to night courses to learn how to speak it, English, and he did real well. He was a carpenter and worked on many, many jobs, was a foreman of some jobs, which meant that he was in control of all the carpenters. And then at one point, he and a friend decided to go in business for themselves and build houses. So he built quite a few houses and would turn around and sell them to people. And he built the house that I lived in from 3rd grade on to when I moved out to go to school. He had a lot of friends help him with the house, but Grandpa never did a shortcut with his work. He always did it the best way he could, and he took great pride in all that he did. And that's what all of us should do, try our best in whatever we're trying to learn and study and do our best, and that's the best way to be.
Was there an important building that he worked on when he was a carpenter in New York City? I thought, didn't he help build the Twin Towers? Wasn't he?
Was it?
I thought he did some carpentry work for that. Maybe I'm making that up.
I honestly don't really know. Are we still going?
We're still going.
I know he worked on many jobs, but, you know, as a young kid, I just knew he would go out to work in the morning and come home at night. And he was tired because he did the best he could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, ask the question.
Tell me about your brother. What is his full name and birthday?
My brother only has one name, Kenneth. My mother didn't and father didn't want a middle name, so his name was Kenneth Knutson. We used to call him Knuteman, which was a nickname that he still uses, I think, on his email. My brother went to engineering school. Prior to that, he was in the Air Force for 4 years on the ROTC program, which they would in turn turn around and help pay for his college. He went to Newark College of Engineering in Newark, New Jersey, and when he graduated, he just did not like the thought of having to sit at a desk all the time. And so he wanted to go and do carpentry work like his father as well. So that's what he did.
Okay, ask the question.
Tell me about your brother. What is his full name and birthday?
My brother only has one name, Kenneth. My mother didn't and father didn't want a middle name, so his name was Kenneth Knutson. We used to call him Knuteman, which was a nickname that he still uses, I think, on his email. My brother went to engineering school. Prior to that, he was in the Air Force for 4 years on the ROTC program, which they would in turn turn around and help pay for his college. He went to Newark College of Engineering in Newark, New Jersey, and when he graduated, he just did not like the thought of having to sit at a desk all the time. And so he wanted to go and do carpentry work like his father as well. So that's what he did.
Tell me about your grandparents. What are their full names? Where were they born? What do you remember about them? Your mother's mother, your mother's father, your father's mother, your father's father.
Okay, I grew up until I was about 7 with my set of grandparents in New Jersey. They were my mother's mother and father. My mother's name was Anna, and her father's name was Thomas. I had another set of grandparents, my dad's mom and dad, but they lived in Norway, but I never met them. But when I went to Norway to visit, I looked at the family house. There was a little family house, and in it was a book of all photographs. And here my mother, all those years, had sent pictures of my brother and I over to my dad's mother and father so they could see us growing up. They never came to America. So I never physically met them, but knew a lot about them through Mom reading me letters that they had written. And now their names, I honestly don't remember. They are
Your father's
my
parents?
father's. Does it say
Oh,
it in there?
we'll find it. And then, what about, did you also want to ask about her mother's parents?
I did.
Oh, that was them, okay.
Yeah.
So you never met them, but you,
I met my mother's parents,
Okay,
and I have a picture of me with my grandpa, my mother's father. It was at a Christmas time. I was probably 2 years old, and about the same age as little Elin, and I loved my grandpa and would sit on his lap and just liked to be around him. So I was around 2, and then he died. He worked as a fireman in a factory, and Grandma died when I was around 7 years old.
so her name was Rence Jensen?
That's my mother's.
Oh, your mother's, well, that's your great-grandma.
Yeah.
Your mother, grandma was Anna
Yeah,
Tinette Jensen.
I told him that.
Okay,
But that was it.
all right.
Did you ever
When you were young,
did you ever
when you were young,
when you were young, how did you celebrate Valentine's Day? Did you ever make a Valentine for someone special?
I would assume in school we would have Valentine's Day parties, and we would share cards between each other. But back then, to specifically make something for one particular person, I don't think so.
Did you know how to sew or knit? Who taught you?
Well, I learned how to sew. My mom would sew a lot of things, all doll clothes for me. And then I started to sew. I would make all my clothes, my dolls' clothes. And to this day, I could sew if I wanted to, but I don't do it as much as
did
I
your
used
mom
to.
teach you how to sew? Or did you learn at
That and in
school?
school. In fact, I remember a story where we were in what they call economics class. And we worked in pairs, and there was a girl, in fact, I still remember her name was Eleanor, and she was so intent on sewing that she had her finger by where the needle would come down, and the needle went right through her fingernail. And that was really scary. I don't know how they got it out or what they did, but I remember that. And then I also had home ec, where you would learn to cook. And my best friend, Mary Lee, who I still see and talk to a lot, she was doing dishes, and she fainted and fell in the dishwater. So those are my 2 recollections of learning to sew and to cook, were those 2 silly things that happened to my friends.
What do you remember about your childhood home or neighborhood?
Well, I lived in a town called Bloomfield, New Jersey, on Walter Street, in a 2-family house. And my grandma lived on the first floor, my mother's mother, and we lived up on the second floor. And we lived there until 3rd grade, when my dad was in the process of building our house in Caldwell on number 22 Highview Road. So from 3rd grade on, we lived in Caldwell, and we just sold that home less than a year ago. And then, as a young girl, my mom and dad, they bought a house down the shore in a place called Seaside Park. And if you remember, we just had a horrible hurricane that went through that area in Seaside Heights was right above Seaside Park, and they had amusements there. And the storm took the whole big Ferris wheel, dumped it in the ocean. So our house was only a block away from the ocean, so I can imagine what happened to it. My dad sold it to go into business, I told you, to build houses. So we were there, and every summer we had lots of friends to come and visit and stay overnight, and a lot of happy memories there. But that's it, I think.
What memories do you have about going to church as a child?
Going to church was our life, so far as our family, because it was very important. We would go to church on Sunday, have Sunday school and church, go home and eat, and then go back again for a church service at night. And then during the week, we went to a group called Pioneer Girls or Boys Brigade, where we would learn a lot of Bible verses, but also do fun things. So going to church was our way of learning about the Lord and how important He was in our life. And to this day, my social life is around the church where I go to now.
What was recess like when you were a kid?
Recess. Grandma didn't like recess very much. I was not very athletic. I remember being on a baseball team, and once in a while I did get a hit, but I was glad when it rained and we didn't have to go out.
Is that it? Is that your question? Wait. So ask again?
What's your favorite Norwegian dish?
Well, we always had on Christmas, we would get together with all our family and we would have codfish and with boiled potatoes, and then we would have what we call julegrud, which we would call the Christmas pudding, where we would cook 1 cup of rice to 6 cups of milk, and eventually it got thick, and we would serve it with butter and sugar and cinnamon. And I loved it, but my brother Kenneth never liked it, and to this day wouldn't eat it. So when I would visit your dad and his family, I was so happy that all of you kids learned and liked julegrud, the rice pudding.
Uncle Blair doesn't like it.
No,
No.
no, Uncle Blair does not like rice pudding. And
Were there other Norwegian traditions that, or other things that you did growing up that have a Norwegian origin?
well, I remember, I guess it was the Sunday after Christmas, we would go to this Norwegian church, and they would have a Christmas tree down in the basement. There were no chairs around it, and we would walk around the Christmas tree and sing all the Norwegian songs. Not that I ever knew Norwegian, but that was one tradition that we always liked to do.
I think we did that. I think that Christmas we were out there when Arne was 1. I think you might have gone home or something.
Yeah.
And we went to that church.
in
Or
Norway?
and no, this was in New Jersey, and there was a church that had like. So I remember being in the
Yeah.
basement and going
Yeah.
around the tree, and
Yeah.
we had you there.
And I have been in Norway 3 times. And the first time I went with your grandpa Arnold. He was in the Air Force and he was stationed in England. And we had some time off and we flew to Norway to meet all of my dad's family. My dad had died, so he wasn't able to come, but I met all the aunts and uncles, would visit everybody, and they would feed us a whole lot of things. I met my cousins there, and we had a good time. And then the second time we went to Norway as a family was when your dad and Uncle Blair had just finished college. Grandpa Arnold was still living, and we took your great-grandma Signa, my mom, along with us. And we went to Norway for 3 weeks. And we stayed, I stayed with my cousin, Ragnhild, and her husband, Tor. Our whole family did. And Grandma and Grandpa stayed with one of Grandpa's sisters, Tante Margaret. And then for a week, we took a road trip, our family of 4 and Grandma, and we went up to northern Norway. And Uncle Blair was the one who drove the car most of the way. It was a shift car, and he was very good at doing it, so he drove. And all the time we were driving, we went up above the timberline, which there was lots of snow. We listened to the music on the CD or the tape of Edvard Grieg, who was a Norwegian, so the music was, it was just very, very nice. And then the third time I went to Norway after Grandpa Arnold died for my 60th birthday, and my cousin Ragnhild is only 2 months younger than me, so we celebrated our birthdays together, and we went on a cruise from northern, up the tip of Norway on the border of Russia, down to Trondheim, I think, but it was a 6 or 7 day cruise. My cousin and her husband went, and my 2 other cousins and Tante Margaret. So I've had a lot of nice times in Norway, and someday I hope to get back again.
What was the most common food you ate?
In Norway?
Yeah.
Well, they love serving waffles. They have a waffle iron. In fact, I think I gave her
We
mom
have
one of those. They're in the shape of a heart. And they would serve waffles. And one of the neatest things, when our family went there, the second time I went, we met at Tante Gudrun and Uncle Arne's house, the same name as you, and they had open-faced sandwiches. I guess my aunt didn't make them, she had some lady make them, but they were beautiful. They were works of art, and we would sit and eat them. And they always had food of all different kinds. And I remember my Uncle Arne, Tante Gudrun's husband, that same first day, he boiled coffee, and they don't put the coffee in a strainer. They have the coffee ground just boiled in the water, and it got down to the end of the coffee, the liquid, and he went to pour Grandpa Arnold a cup, and all this like glue came out in the cup. So they have different things.
And what was different about living in Norway?
Well, technically we didn't live there, we just visited there.
Visiting?
But the scenery was beautiful. They lived in open spaces, they lived on a farm, and you could see the water right out there by each of the places. It's the beauty, I think, was the nicest part. And of course, being with the people that you loved.
Go.
How did you meet Grandpa Arnold?
Grandpa Arnold, I lived in Cornwall and he lived in North Cornwall. But he went to a different school than I did. But we met at a Bible club that was meeting once a week. It was called High School Born Againers. And that's when I got interested in him. Our parents knew each other prior to our having met. But Grandma was sometimes sneaky because I wanted to meet him. And so he went to a private school, and he would come home on a bus. And sometimes, in fact a couple of times, I just happened to be there and bump into him on purpose so I could see him. And we just got more involved and wanted to be together. And we dated. We knew each other about 8 years before we finally got married.
How old were you when you met?
I think I was 15 and he was 17. And I went away to school up to a place called Houghton, New York, which is about an hour and a half away from Niagara Falls. So Grandpa would come up on a weekend sometime to visit me. And for the day, usually on the Saturday, we would drive to Niagara Falls, spend some time there, and then come back to college. And then he would have to drive back to where he lived in New Jersey. But yeah, we were married May 29th in 1965. And we were married for 6 years, and then your dad was born. And then about 14 months later, Uncle Blair was born. So we had like twins, almost. We were new parents with 2 babies. But we loved it, and Grandpa Arnold was so helpful in taking care of both his boys. And he would just have loved to see all you good grandchildren. So then he took sick, and he died in 1999. So Grandma's been without him